police shootings, and I mean stuff that's general news. Have you tried, have you wanted to focus more on, I know you've also done a lot of environmental stuff, but is that where you want to go? And
yes.
Is it sometimes difficult in that environment?
Very much so. Yes, very much so. My first job in journalism actually was in local news, the same station that I kind of critiqued in that paper. But when I got there, I ended up covering a lot of local activists, and I think that was really how I got into environmental journalism. Was that I'd grown up with activists. I grew up in Atlanta. I grew up around a lot of lieutenants of Martin Luther King. They were my dad's friends, and so this whole spirit of people who are passionate about something that is affecting large numbers of people was kind of a theme, and being comfortable and talking to them was a theme in my life. And then when I got to CNN, I found that those people, I don't know if it was me or if it was what, but they would gravitate towards me rather. And what ended up happening was I sat down with a lot of folks from Louisiana. I covered mainly the Southeast region, and Louisiana is like a hotbed for all types of environmental malfeasance.
I saw a piece that you were involved with about air pollution in a community and high rates of cancer.
Yes. That was one story that kind of did have an impact, because the follow-up to that didn't make it to air because of the political climate. Well, the follow-up didn't make it to air because it wasn't moving. It wasn't at that point. Yeah, I kind of hit the sweet spot for environmental news at that point. That was coming out of the general news side of the network, but the follow-up was that they did have to change the way they recorded tumors in that region. Yeah, it's hard to break through. To answer your question, it's very hard to break through unless you find with environmental stories at a general breaking news TV digital outlet. But that never stopped me. I mean, I pursued that particular story for about a year and a half before it even got published.
Wow. As I say, I want to keep this pretty casual. I've got lots of questions, but if people have questions, I'm happy to start getting you guys in the mix, or I'll just keep going. But feel free to raise your hand if you've got a question at some point. When we talk about journalism, generally people are thinking about being a writer or a reporter, but there's a lot more to journalism than that.
Yes.
You've been a producer.
Yes.
You're an editor as well as a writer.
Yeah.
But maybe actually you can speak up, Hillary, a little bit about the difference between being a writer and an editor. What do you like about each role?
Well, so I sort of started out as an editor. I mean, when I worked at the New York Post, I was a reporter, and then I went on to the Village Voice, and I was an editor there. And I actually loved it until I got to a point where I started feeling like I was trying, I was assigning all these stories to people, and they were coming back, and I was, working with them and editing them, but I suddenly thought, I don't know if I could actually do this story. Like, I don't know, who am I to be telling this person how to do it when it's been such a long time since I've reported, like, I don't know if I could do it. And so I actually left the Village Voice to go out and be a reporter again. And I loved it, and that was amazing for years. And then a few years ago, I had an opportunity to edit. I had an opportunity to guest edit a special issue of a magazine, and it was so much fun. First of all, it was so much fun to come up with a story idea and then give it to somebody else, and not have to stress out about how I'm going to do it. And I found that very liberating. And then I felt like because I had all this experience as a reporter, and writer, now I actually I did have stuff to contribute. And so over the last couple of years, I've tried to balance that. So I'm an editor at a website called Geographic. We do long form features there, and it's great. I mean, so I was at a conference a couple of years ago, and I, there was this great story idea that came about, and it was in Alaska, and I was like, God, I have a young kid, and I was like, I don't have time to go to Alaska. Like, how am I going to squeeze this in? And then I was like, I can send somebody else. And it really was this amazing thing, and I did, and I sent somebody else, and I worked very closely with her on the story, and so I think it's really nice to balance it, and I actually think both things help you be better at the other one.
Do you ever hold on to stories that you come across as an editor that you think, like, I want to write this story?
You mean steal their ideas?
Well, no.
Well, that's the best part of being an editor is you can steal their ideas.
We're not interested.
Yeah.
Well, Stephen, you've spent several years as an editor.
Yeah, I've mostly worked. I think I've freelanced less than most people at this table.
Yeah. And you like editing?
If I did, I probably would still be doing it.
Oh.
Wow.
No, I mean, I think I had one of those moments where I was sitting at a desk and thinking, God, I want to be out there doing the writing.
You think I can do this better?
Actually, more like Hillary said, I kind of worried that I couldn't. I
Uh-huh.
kind of worried that I had gotten so used to being behind the scenes that I had forgotten how to stick my nose out. I mean, a part of being a good journalist is putting yourself in uncomfortable situations.
Right.
And being an editor can sometimes be a very comfortable situation.
Yeah.
I mean, depending, but
Well.
in a different kind of way, I guess. But yeah, so I was, I wanted to get back out into the fray, and be a part of that again. And it's kind of sometimes being an editor can be a bit like Groundhog Day. You come in, you do your editing, you send out your assignments, you get more things, and the next day is the same. And every now and then a big story will break, like Trump will get elected or something, and then you've got to deal with that. But for the most part, it's just kind of this ongoing role. And whereas as a reporter, you like every time you get a new assignment, it's like you're starting a new class.
Yeah.
Right. Although I guess one advantage to the Groundhog Day existence is it's more predictable. So if like you have a family or
Yeah, very much
Or
so.
you want to
Paycheck
be
comes
able
on the regular.
Health insurance.
well, yeah, right.
Yeah, a lot of good
Well,
books there.
but also I'm curious where you guys get your story ideas. Elizabeth, you mentioned that the defecation story was not your idea, but do you come up with most of your story ideas?
It's
Where do you
kind of
find them?
Half and half
Mhm.
now. I write a lot for National Geographic, and mostly they come to me. So they just said, like, we want to do a sanitation story, and like you take it from there, and that's like.
Huh.
Wow.
So
well,
then,
meaning outdoor defecation, or even
no,
broader than
not
that?
at all. That was just like, we think this is one of the sustainable development goals is to improve sanitation. So we don't know what the story is or where, and so. But it is half and half. I read a lot of news feeds, a lot of environmental news. Like my secret weapon is reading through environmental health news above the fold every day, which is an aggregation of it's a lot of local and national and international stories. And
So are you looking for like something hidden in a story, like
kind
just
of. So looking for things that are undercovered, something that sparks, that resonates with me. It's really all over the place, though. Yeah.
Anybody else have tips where they come up with?
I'm
their
not a
best-
great generator of ideas. I
Yeah.
will say that. Yeah, so I'm glad that people come to me with them.
Huh.
So I've subscribed to like a few listservs, one of which is Eureka Alert, which is basically just every science study and press release from every university in the country will send these emails every day of like all these studies coming out. And I tend to look for studies with terrible names and terrible marketing that I can tell are really interesting.
Yeah.
So that other people might not
Might not,
recognize
yep.
why they're as interesting as they are. So like one of the ways I got going down this wormhole of writing about mass extinctions, there's a study in I think 2013 that was called Uranium-Led Geochronology of the Palisades Sill Linked with End Triassic Mass Extinction. And I was like, holy shit, are they saying what I think they're saying? Which is basically like these cliffs across from Manhattan are the remnants of a volcanic event that shot enough CO2 into the air to almost kill everything on the planet. And sure enough, no one covered the story at all. And I pitched it to all these places, and I didn't convince any of them. And just sort of as a Hail Mary, I Googled like an editor's name at the New York Times. I was like, well, it's right across from New York. Maybe they'll be interested in it. And the guy's like, great, go report it. And I was like, all right, okay. And so then I
There's a
walked
lesson for
around
you
with
all.
this geologist at Columbia who showed me around the Palisades and gave me this great story about global warming 200 million years ago that almost killed everything. And it's it's right next to Manhattan. So that's especially now that a few years researching the book, I sort of can speak this language a little better that these geologists speak. And this program especially has even like deepened my ability to do that. I'm able to pick out things that that are more interesting than you'd ever guess based on scientists' inability to market them as such, I guess.
Well, I guess I would say back when I was a journalist and not just writing books, so I don't have to come up with ideas so frequently right now. But I would say my best ideas came from just chats with
Yeah.
scientists.
Happy hours at conferences.
Well,
Yeah.
or I would-
Scientists tell you what they really think.
Yeah,
That's what
right.
I get a lot
I
of.
would try. I would try to remember at the end of every interview, although I often forgot, to say, well, before we go, anything going on in your field that
yeah.
you think I should know about? And usually nothing would come up. But every once in a while, someone would say something really interesting. And the other thing too that I found that I could get usually from scientists themselves, but I have a hard time figuring out on my own, is trend stories. What's bubbling up? What are you seeing out there that's sort of coalescing that people haven't really tapped into as a trend yet?
That was I was about to say that was one of the necks that I had to develop in reporting and pitching environmental news in the kind of ecosystem of storytelling at a big network like CNN.
About what? How to find stories?
How to find the trend,
Oh.
find that sweet spot of like what's trending versus what I'm interested in versus what is important to actually let the public know about. And that's ended up being a lot of fracking.
Yeah.
And then I got this air pollution story going. I started working on the research for my project here about 2.5 years ago when I was in Ghana.
Overfishing.
It's
in
about
Africa?
overfishing. Sorry, yeah. I'm working on a project here about overfishing in West Africa, and thanks to Peter, and he actually opened me up to a whole another side of the story, which is the precursor to the pirate crisis in Somalia was overfishing and industrial trawlers illegally taking fish out of the waters, forcing the local fishing population to arm themselves and patrol their own coastal waters, which then eventually became them turning into pirates because that was a much bigger and steadier source of income from the insurance companies' payouts of these hostage takeovers
Than selling the
versus them digging around and fishing around for fish that weren't there anymore, really.
We've done a good job of keeping this very upbeat. I mean, not on the topics, but the job. But I mean, in the time that you guys, and you've been in the profession different amounts, but how are you seeing things change? Is it harder to pitch stories? Harder to? I mean, particularly in the last few years in this Trump era, it seems everything's about politics, and the news cycle is constant. And has that affected your lives?
Yeah, there's not enough pages. Well, the magazine feature wells are smaller. There's fewer ads, so there's less room for our stories. And
Are the stories shrinking too?
Yes, they're shrinking, and the fees have come down. They haven't stayed the same or gone up. They've gone dramatically down, and Trump is taking up all the air and space, and
Yeah, I mean, to me, like the word rate thing is really the biggest issue. The length of stories, because even if you're getting paid the same amount
per year, you mean per word?
Yeah, if you're getting paid the same, I mean, yes, nobody's raising their rates. So like I'm getting paid the same amount or less as I was when I started
10 years
freelancing,
ago.
whatever, 15 years ago or something.
Wow.
But
Yeah.
also the stories then the story might have been 7,000 words and now it's 2,500 words. So, and you're still
Lot
having to
less
go,
money.
Halfway across the world
Do
to
the same
report
work.
it, and you're still taking up the same amount of time. And so, I mean, it's interesting. I got to a point a couple of years ago where I had finally sort of reached the goal. Like I'd finally sort of become what I always wanted to become in my career, like just in time to realize that it was actually impossible to make a living doing that. Which, when I had first like set this as a goal, it wasn't. You could, you weren't going to get rich, but like you could do fine. And now,
that's the editing.
well, but the editing, I mean, it doesn't really. I mean, it's definitely a quandary. Like I have no idea, and I'm constantly like, I speak to a lot of students at different universities, and people are always asking like, what should I do, and should I freelance, and what should I, and I'm always like, no, do not, absolutely do not start out freelancing.
Or do not start out, but you still think that could be a goal down the line?
I don't know. I mean, I feel like, Elizabeth and I are, in a similar position in that we sort of been at this long enough that we still get the, like, better rates.